Richard, you don't hesitate to tell me to move to the next slide, right? Okay.
Okay.
Mm.
A warm welcome, everybody. I think we'll start, we'll give it a few minutes, maybe 2 minutes to allow for more participants to join us, and then we can start.
Thank you and good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Hi, Princess. Long time from Accra.
We'll start in 1 minute. As you join, kindly start by ensuring that your name and designation reflects on the screen, so we get to know who you are. This is expected to be an interactive session, so put as many questions as possible in the chat or in the chat, and we will address the questions as we move about. Feel free to raise your hand as we go through the presentation of the sessions, and we will get to call you out and respond. We'll give it a couple of more minutes to allow everybody to join, everybody we're expecting, and we are kindly asking for your patience as we allow our colleagues to join this session. For those of you who have just joined, kindly ensure you have your name and designation and the institution that you're representing on your screen, so to allow us to know who is in the room. We will have a session where we'll do a round of introductions, but yes, we'd like to see you on the screen. For this session, we have interpretation in French. maybe 2 minutes before we can start. It is now 6 minutes past the hour. I think we can go ahead and start. And we'll have our colleagues join us as we go along. Okay, so good afternoon, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Regulators Roundtable on the Inclusivity of Instant Payment Systems, hosted by African Enda. My name is Jacqueline Juma, the Director of Advocacy and Capacity Development, and it's my pleasure to have you all as part of this forum. Today's roundtable has several intended outcomes. These are, we're looking toward a deeper understanding of the support needs in policy to promote the scale of inclusive instant payment systems, and we'll talk about what we mean by this. An understanding of the inclusivity framework, which is a high-level tool created out of the research, which is the State of Inclusive Instant Payments Research, and key considerations. We're looking towards a peer learning and exchange forum among stakeholders in the room, and also looking at some commitments to see how we can support data sharing, that is data availability and transparency, to be able to continue tracking the landscape. After this session, we will be sharing a brief report on conversations, and we welcome you to participate for most interactions. Next slide, please. So firstly, this session will run for 1 hour, 1.5 hours, sorry, and we will welcome your full participation. On the agenda, we have 6 key items. We will begin by introducing ourselves, so we all know who is in the room. I know we are putting our names on display, but it's just good to also hear your voice. And following these introductions, we'll quickly move to making a 10-minute presentation, which will be the basis for our conversations today, exploring how to scale instant payment systems in Africa. We'll then pause for questions after this presentation and split into teams for discussions to tackle an exercise. After the group discussions, we'll be expected to share our contributions in this larger forum again. And finally, we'll wrap up today's session. Let's now transition into a quick round of introductions. I think the way to go about it, I will be calling out the names as I see on the screen. And then kindly just chime in and share your name, designation, and the institution that you're representing. Allow me to start in no particular order. Sorry, I'm not able to see everyone. Okay. Bethel. Sorry. There is Princess.
Good afternoon. I'm Princess Tammy from Bank of Sierra Leone, Senior Manager, Financial Sector Development Unit, Bank of Sierra Leone.
We have Isabel.
Welcome, Princess.
There is Muta.
Good afternoon. My name is Muta Mushumbusi. I work with the Bank of Tanzania. I'm an assistant manager looking after retail payment systems. It's good to be here.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Yeah,
Good
afternoon.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, good afternoon. My name is William Mwangose. I'm also working with the Bank of Tanzania. I'm the manager looking up.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Albert Boima, Assistant Director, National Switch Division, Bank of Sierra Leone.
Thank you and welcome. We also have Hussein Habib.
You are on mute. We can't hear you.
Hussein?
Yeah, I believe Hussein has a problem in his microphone. My name is Mohammed Abdurrahman, Head of Payment Instruments and Acceptance Channels, Central Bank of Egypt.
Thank you, Mohammed, and welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Miata Kute, Payment Systems Department, Central Bank of Liberia, basically responsible for regulations and oversight of payments. Thank you.
Thank you and welcome. Have I left anybody?
Maybe calling back Isabel Oaga?
Yes.
I think
Yes. Isabel? I think perhaps she has a mic issue. Okay, I'll allow her to introduce herself a bit later, so to allow us to move on. Okay. Barry, I'm not able to see the screen at this point. Okay.
Yes. The presentation is on the screen. Do you want me to move to the next slide?
Yes, please. So I'll start with an introduction of Africanenda. So who is Africanenda? Next slide, please. Africanenda is an African-led team of experts committed to unlocking the potential of digital financial services for the financially excluded across the continent by accelerating the scale up of inclusive instant payment systems. Africanenda is made up of 18 staff members across 14 nationalities, living in 10 countries on the continent. Next slide, please. This is where our story begins. Despite significant growth in financial inclusion in the continent, over 400 million adults in sub-Saharan Africa are still primarily excluded from the formal economy, relying heavily on the use of cash or informal providers for their financial management, which is costly, risky, and leaves them to be vulnerable to economic instability. Africanenda believes that inclusive instant payment systems, we're still on this slide, sorry. Africanenda believes that inclusive instant payment systems can play a pivotal role in creating universal access to financial services. And we are on a mission to unlock and tap to opportunities by advancing national and regional instant payments infrastructure. We do so through firstly providing technical assistance to support the ecosystem, leveraging private capital into investment trading instant payment projects, and secondly, through strengthening the capacity of and knowledge of instant payments in Africa's most influential institutions. And of course, we do this in partnership with various stakeholders that we share this vision. Next slide, please. Next slide. So what do we mean by instant payment systems? And when do they become inclusive? Africanet and its partners define instant payment systems, which we typically call IPS, as open-loop multilateral retail payment systems that enable the transmission of low-value and digital push payments through a set of procedures, rules, and technical standards, and where the final funds are available to the payee, who is the recipient, in near real time and as near to 24 hours a day, 7 days a week as possible. Also, a single instant payment systems may encompass one or more systems in which licensed payment service providers participate through open loop and multilateral interoperability arrangements. This definition involves instant retail payment systems domiciled in Africa that are open loop and that enable digital push transactions in real time. This categorization, therefore, explicitly excludes proprietary on-us instant payment systems, including most cards schemes. Now, from this definition, instant payment systems become inclusive when additional attributes designed to meet the needs of low-income consumers are enabled. These attributes have been derived from an analysis of various principles, such as the Level 1 principles, the UN principles of responsible digital payments, standards from the BIS, Project FAST, and other initiatives. Inclusivity, therefore, is measured both in functionality, which just means the extent to which end users' payment needs are met, exploring financial instruments, channels, and use cases. From a governance perspective, we're also looking at inclusivity to explore attributes such as the extent to which licensed payment providers, those are the FSPs, participants in the schemes, have fair access and also contribute to decision-making at the scheme. Next slide, please. So we are saying that if inclusive, instant payment systems can reinforce the payment layer of the digital public infrastructure. For instant payment systems in Africa to increase access for all citizens and form an effective payment layer in digital public infrastructure, systems will need to improve in these core attributes. That is the sustainability, which just means ensuring that there's design for scale and to address market needs while limiting end user cost compared with cash, which is what we are trying to avoid. And then looking at other attributes like consumer centricity, where we're looking at supporting what the consumers want and addressing their pain points in terms of instruments, channels, and the use cases that these payment systems support. A compelling provider value proposition where we ensure that the financial service providers involved in the systems derive value from the incentives that have been provided. And then the other theme, which is largely going to be the emphasis of our conversation today, is the conducive policy environment, where we are exploring a continued improvement of the supporting ecosystem, ensuring that we have an enabling environment, an open and level playing field, and moving toward risk-based supervision. There's also the need to explore at this, still in this theme, regional harmonization of policy and regulation for cross-border payments and transfers to enable instant payment systems to catalyze digital trade and remittances, through retail cross-border transactions. Next slide, please. So I'll welcome my colleague Sabine to talk through the inclusivity spectrum and to also talk about IPS inclusivity as defined. Thank you. Sabine?
Thank you very much, Jacqueline. I think in our haste to start, we haven't introduced ourselves. My name is Sabine Mensah. I'm Deputy CEO for Africa and my colleague Jacqueline is Director of Advocacy and Capacity Development. Thank you so much. I also want to thank all of our colleagues from Africanenda who are on the call and the regulators and policymakers who have taken the opportunity to join us today. I think from our perspective at Africanenda, we look at inclusivity from 3 lenses. One is from a regulatory perspective, hence the discussion we're having with you today. The second lens is from a supply side perspective, including the instant payment system operators themselves, as well as the payment service providers, the participants into the scheme. And the third lens we look at it is from a consumer centricity perspective, understanding the perspective of consumers themselves and where some of those challenges can come in. And so in our attempt to assess inclusivity, we're looking through a spectrum because we feel that inclusivity is not necessarily, yes, I'm inclusive, yes, I'm not, or yes, the system is, or yes, the system isn't, but mostly the system is at this level, or the system is inclusive from this perspective. And that's where this spectrum is proposed as part of the CIPS research since 2022. The first component we're looking at, and really what we're trying to push is for digital payments to be useful to consumer, they have to provide at least some level of what we do with cash and more. And from that sense, for us at the basic level, we're looking at first, it has to be accessible on all channels. Because digital payments requires a tool to be able to process a transaction, requires a channel to be able to access to the infrastructure, it is important that at a minimum, the instant payment system provide functionalities, provide channels that are mostly used in the country. We all know that Africa is a mobile continent by design, or actually by necessity for that matter, because from a card legacy perspective, we will still have a lot of people excluded from the card system, but mobile has enabled us to bring financial inclusion to the most remote places and also to the most excluded population. So at the basic level, the system has to enable and support all channels. We also want to look at what do you do with cash versus what do you do with digital money. So, and yes, aside from sending money to somebody, you also pay for your everyday expenses, whether it's goods or it's utilities or any payments that you have to do. So in this case, at the basic level, your instant payment system has to enable person-to-person transfers, but also person-to-business payments. So this can be merchant payment or it can be utility payment. That's what we're looking at when we assess an instant payment system at the most basic level. We've had difficulties in this assessment process up till now because of lack of information, because a lot of our research is based on what's available in the public domain, in addition to a questionnaire that we share with all the instant payment systems across Africa. And we are really counting on the participants to provide that information. When we look at progress level of inclusivity, there are really 3 key areas or criteria that we're looking at. We are looking at making sure that from an access perspective, the system enable all licensed payment service providers into a country or into a region, depending on if it's a country or a regional system, to have access to the instant payment infrastructure. We're also looking at it now. If you flip the coin from a supply side to a customer centricity perspective, we are looking at interoperability all to all within that instant payment system. Whether you're moving money from bank account to a bank account to mobile money to bank account, mobile money to mobile money, interoperability all to all, because that brings a level of convenience for consumers. What we're also assessing in the progress level is the type of governance the scheme has and how inclusive that governance is. And for us, the inclusivity of the governance is also determined by the role that the regulator is playing within the system, whether it's a central bank or any other financial regulator that is part of the system and is also contributing or leading the governance of the system. And of course, most of our countries have financial inclusion strategies that they've put into place. And we feel that the regulator or a third party was balancing the interests of the private sector versus the financial inclusion mandate that is at the country level and at the central bank level helps really make sure that the system is looking at the inclusivity of the consumers first and ensuring that that's served by the providers that are part of the scheme. So at that point, that's where we call the progress level of inclusivity. You have interoperability, you have a regulator in the governance of the scheme. I think the third level for us is the mature level of inclusivity from a systems perspective. And at that point, we feel that instant payment system have to not only do everything that we're doing with cash, but they have to provide actually more benefits and opportunities from a consumer perspective. And they also have to ensure a certain degree of recourse mechanism, a certain degree of protection for the consumers that are using digital services. And they have to also provide affordable services to consumer. And at that point, what we try to factor is, are all the use cases supported by the system? So it's not just person-to-person transfer, payment for merchants or bill, but you also can receive government payments. You can do government payments. The system can enable SME payments, payment to SMEs, SMEs to SMEs. So all use cases, as best as possible, are active in the system, and consumers and businesses can use the system for their payments need. And of course, we know that we are in a digital space, whereas we really need to make sure that consumer protection mechanisms are strong in the system, but even more than that, they are known. So they're transparent, they're communicated to consumers, and there's a recourse mechanism in place when the system is not working as it's supposed to work. Consumers know where they can take their complaints to, and they can see that there's a resolution after investigation that comes back to the consumer. And at the end of the day, consumers get the sense that cash is free. Like there's no cost to cash. I have it in my pocket. I spend it where I want. For digital to provide as much value as we would want to, we need to make sure that the cost point for the usage of digital services is as low as possible, if not even not there for some of the most basic transactions like person-to-person transfer or payments. At this point, what we want to, in summary, what I would like to stress is really looking at making sure that from a functionality perspective, the system is as inclusive as possible and mirrors what we do with cash and has an ecosystem that enables all use cases. From a governance perspective, that not only interoperability is enabled, but all payment service providers are a part of the ecosystem and have an equal input opportunity in the decisions that the schemes make. And last but not least, from a consumer standpoint, looking and making sure that not only the usability in terms of use cases is there, but that the cost point from an affordability perspective is as low as possible and incentivize digital usage and digital adoption across the instant payment system. I think that's a bit of the inclusivity spectrum framework that we've designed, and we leverage this framework to actually assess the different schemes that we've landscaped into the SIPS report. And if we move to the next slide, you would see where we stand. One of the things and what we're trying to every year is to actually make that first column that says not ranked disappear. That column stands there for the simple reason that either we don't have the information to assess if the system is meeting the basic level of inclusivity, or the system, we have the information, but they're only providing maybe one use case, person to person, and they're not catering to the person to business. Remember, during the basic level of inclusivity, you need to provide at minimum these two use cases, person to person and person to merchant. The basic inclusivity, you can see some of the schemes that we have noted there. I want to stress that this information was based on information we gathered until last year, June 2023. It is a mix of public data search engine, in addition to the data that some of the central banks and IPS operators have graciously shared with us directly, and information that we've been able to gather on publications across the world. So we are looking at the refining the information here and making sure that we have more and more accurate data. And this year, for the launch of the CIPS 2024, we have sent out a request formally to all the payment system directors of the central banks, the IPS operators, CEOs, to request data and share the questionnaire. And we hope we will receive as much data collected as possible to be able to show an even more accurate perspective of what's ongoing in Africa today. I think that's it for my part. So I will pass it on back to Barry to facilitate the Q&A session. And Barry, while we are on there, you can come back to the slide that shows the definition of the different level. In case we have questions, it becomes easier to refer it to.
Right.
Then the one before. Yes, thank you.
Right, thank you, Sabine and Jacqueline, for taking us through some definition and setting the stage. I think you've well defined what is instant payment system, the inclusivity part, and how it's linked to DPI, and what we're trying to do within the CIPS report. So if there is any question at this stage, any question, comments, insights regarding the first part of the roundtable, feel free to unmute your microphone and then ask your question, please. You can also type it in the chat, and then I will pass it to Jacqueline and Sabine.
For the mature level, you have mentioned that expanded use cases. So in this area, what do you mean by expanded use cases?
Thank you very much for the question, Mohammed. It's a pleasure to see you again.
Thank you,
And have
sir.
the participation of the Central Bank of Egypt on this forum. So because at the basic level, we mentioned just person-to-person use case and person-to-merchant, for us, the expanded use case will include government-to-person, person-to-government, business-to-business, business-to-government, business-to-person. So it's a whole spectrum of the different alternation of use cases between individual use, SME use, and government use in payments, both to and from, that we're calling the expanded use cases. And actually, you can also add also cross-border, because some schemes are actually enabling also cross-border payments. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed, for the question. Thank you, Sabine. Any other question, any comments, any insight you want to share?
Yes, I want also to comment on the next slide, which mentions the countries. Yes, for the position for Egypt, for InstaPay, or Instant Payment Network in Egypt, and InstaPay application, as I believe we are now in the progressed level, not in the basic level as well.
Thank you very much for the feedback. That's one of the reasons why we are in discussion with you to showcase Instant Payment Network as a case study in the 2024 CIPS report. So we're really looking forward to promoting that case study as it comes. But thank you very much also. You are one of the central banks who has shared the data with us already for CIPS 2024, and we thank you for that.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Feel free to chime in, Princess Kanu. Yes, go ahead, Princess Kanu.
I
You're
think
on
she's
mute.
mute. Yeah.
Yes, you're on mute.
Am I recognized? Okay, absolutely. Yes, so thank you, Sabine and Jacqueline, for the presentation that gives us a quick insight in terms of what the 2023 instant payment report looks like for the continent. I'm just not seeing anything that has to do with credit. That's one use case that we're starting to see, you know, on instant payment platform being enabled by mobile money providers and other fintechs. So did you see anything of such during your assessment?
Jacqueline, do you want to take that?
I can attempt to answer the question. So going back to our definition, perhaps, Barry, you might want to go back to what we mean by instant payment systems. We were not looking at the products which are supported by the payment system. So the payment systems is the piece of but the infrastructure that sits behind what we see as tangible products, which consumers interact with in their money management. So our definition looks at the back end of things, the payment systems themselves, and not the products and services sitting on the payment systems.
Okay.
Can I add to that? I would say, however, one component of the inclusivity assessment that is linked to it from a consumer standpoint is the consumer protection framework and the fact that we're asking for transparent and efficient mechanism so that if consumer is sold something that doesn't work or the system is not delivering on what it's supposed to, the consumer knows where to direct their complaint, and that in the back end, the infrastructure provider is able to respond to the complaint. From an infrastructure perspective, where there's opportunity to even strengthen that requirement from a consumer protection is that the scheme can ask that the participants, so the financial service providers that are part of the scheme, actually monitor and also even report the types of incidents they have, the frequency of the incidents, the time it takes them to respond to the incident. And so as the scheme, there can be some requirement in terms of transparency also on the way that the providers are managing incident and reinforcing that consumer protection framework that's asked for. So I hope that answers your question, Princess.
Thank you. Thank you, Sabine and Jacqueline. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Princess. Any other question from Tanzania? Maybe Albert?
Yes, I'm surprised that I have not heard a question from Muta.
Hi, Sabine. I think I was very fortunate to be at the launch of the 2023 report, and everything is very clear to me. You've clarified that this data was mostly based from data from the internet and search engines. Of course, I understand if you look at tips where it's been put, I think it's at matured level by now, but I feel that in the next report, once we do the evaluation and we provide data, you'll be able to put it at where it actually belongs. But I understand why it is considered to be at the basic level, because at that time, the information that you had was not really coming from us. But it's okay. We can work towards that, I think, as you are working towards the 2024 report. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your feedback, Muta, and we'd like to congratulate Central Bank of Tanzania for the launch of the TIPS infrastructure, which happened, I believe, just last week, right, Muta?
Yes, it was last week.
Wonderful. We're definitely looking forward to working with you and being able to showcase what the system has done so far, and of course, rank them where they should be. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you.
Barry, back to you.
Right. If there is no further question, maybe Jacqueline, I'll hand over back to you for the second part.
Thank you, Barry. Let's go to the next slide, please. Okay. So in this next session, we have two activities. We would like to, first of all, hear your perspectives on issues that may be impacting the enabling environment for inclusive instant payment systems, having understood the process, the tool that we've highlighted. What are those key policy implementation challenges that exist in enabling the scale of inclusive instant payment systems in Africa? And for this session, please allow me to call you, it's an open forum in plenary where we'll just share our contributions, and please allow me to invite you to share your perspectives on these issues that may be impacting the enabling environment. What should we do, or how can we support policy in this perspective? So I'll call upon perhaps Musa. We can have you, first of all, chime in to share your perspectives on how we can scale IIPS from a policy perspective. Or any other, representative from the Bank of Tanzania. Happy to have you also share. Hello, can anyone hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I think they are on mute, but I see Muta has unmuted.
We hear you loud and clear, Jackie.
Yes, Jacqueline, I heard you, but I thought you called out Musa, and I thought it must not be me. So, but it's okay. So,
Muta, sorry. It's Muta,
it's fine.
not Musa.
So, I think in order to enable scaling of inclusive instant payment systems in Africa, I think it requires a collaboration between central bankers, as well as central bankers. In this context, I mean the regulatory bodies within a certain country, and also to work together with the players in the market. If there is electronic money issuers or mobile money providers, they need to work together with banks, so as you can create one inclusive instant payment system. And at the beginning, I know it's going to be hard, but I feel it can really work. We can manage to work together and establish something that it's of a win-win situation between the central bank, the players, and maybe the switch operator if it happens to be outside the central bank. So I think it calls out for collaboration. That is one. Two, in terms of policy, the central bank or the regulatory body needs to allow for such infrastructures to be put in place and provide the necessary approvals, and they need to support and provide the promotion role. They need to do the promotion role so as these infrastructures get to happen in the payment ecosystem within the country. So if we work on those two things, I think we might be able to scale and actually have more adoption of inclusive instant payment system in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Muta, and apologies for calling you Musa. So collaboration on the part of the regulating bodies, as well as working with players, as well as looking at how the regulators can support the development of infrastructure in country to enable inclusive instant payment systems. I'll move on. Allow me to call Egypt.
Yes, I believe this is a very good question. If we are talking about the scaling of the instant payment systems inside the country, for Egypt, there were a lot of challenges related to upgrading the infrastructure that would be capable of handling a large number of transactions from the bank side. Another challenge related to using the appropriate technologies for example, in Egypt, we are using open APIs technologies. So our instant payment networks based on open APIs in order to allow fintechs and PSP to utilize the use cases of the networks. So the technical standards and implementations is very important. If we are talking about connecting the instant payment systems for several countries together, so I believe there will be some issues needs to be tackled regarding the AML screening for such transactions, the technologies that can be used in order to link those instant payment networks. So if we are if we are thinking about receiving remittances instantly from one country to another country through the integration of the instant payment systems between both countries. So I believe bilateral agreements should be there. Cooperation between the regulators as well should be there. Overcome the issue of the screening of the transactions for the AML purposes also should be there.
Thank you very much. We've spoken about upgrading the infrastructure is really important, adhering to technical standards as well as AML considerations. Thank you. Allow me to call upon the next as the Sierra Leone. Any perspectives?
Good afternoon. I'm not sure whether I'm allowed to speak on behalf of Sierra Leone. My name is Bevan Fadzisai Shapeta. I am the Payment Switch Implementation Manager. I'm working on behalf of the Minister of Finance, but I'm sitting within the Bank of Sierra Leone, and we are implementing an instant payment system. One of the major challenges that we are currently facing is getting the mobile network operators buy-in on the whole concept of the instant payments switching. I'm not too sure whether this is a challenge that has also been experienced in other regions. Perhaps we could get some sort of input from those who might have faced a similar challenge during their own deployment on how they managed to resolve that issue, how they managed to get the buy-in from the MNOs, because I'm sure you can understand that without the MNOs' participation within that infrastructure, there isn't really much of an instant payments system to talk about. The MNOs bring the volumes, they bring the transactions that you want in the ecosystem. How have you managed to get them involved to actively participate, within that ecosystem? That's number one. Number two, in terms of security, what are some of the security concerns that you have encountered during your deployments, and how have you managed to resolve those? Are there any security incidents that you have also encountered, in running the system itself once you have gone live? Are you happy to share, not in so many details, some of those incidents, what happened, how you managed to resolve them, just for learning purposes? Thank you.
Thank you for the perspectives. So looking at involving the mobile money operators who are skeptical to join the schemes and how to define incentives for them, and then looking at security concerns. Any other perspectives? Anybody to chime in at this point? Comments?
Yes, please. So I would like to come in from the Central Bank of Liberia, not far away from Sierra Leone.
Thank you.
Yes. So if you see what has happened over the years is that instant payment has accelerated in terms of usage on the continent. And there's more prospect of accelerating further However, there are few barriers that I want us to talk about, and also how can we break those barriers so that our targets are achieved. I would want to also join my colleagues that spoke about collaboration, partnership and collaboration. That is very key, I think, for instant payment to reach the last mile. We need to collaborate from a regulatory side, not only the central bank, but the telcos regulators. They are very critical. They need to understand the role of the USSD when it comes to creating access to payments leveraging mobile financial services. So one experience that I would like to talk about is we've been experiencing challenge in terms of the issuance of USSD by the telco regulator. So what we did as a central bank was to engage the regulator, the Liberia Telecommunications Authority, and say, look, you have a target, and we do as a central bank in terms of our national financial inclusion strategy. But what we've seen over the years is that the issuance or assignment of a USSD, there's no public policy in terms of how it is done. Can we collaborate through a mutual agreement and be able to work together to regulate the space? And we were able to do that. The MOU isn't signed yet, but we are optimistic that once it gets signed, we will be able to do a lot of work together. So in terms of the USSD, we are also supporting them now in developing a draft regulations for the issuance of USSD, so that exclusivity that the telcos had will be removed and that barrier will be broken. So that's one key aspect of collaboration I would like to talk about in terms of those entities regulating the different space. And then I will also want to speak about understanding the needs of the different communities. It is very important to ensure that instant payment platforms target the specific needs of the different communities that you're working in. You wouldn't want to push the usage of deferred settlement if you have a lot of customers that are used to mobile financial services where payments are instant and irrevocable. So you need to understand the need of your ecosystem, and then you can push those specific. And then I also like to talk about the issue of financial literacy and education. There are products and services via instant payment systems that most of the consumers are not knowledgeable about, the different use cases. It is important to have a robust information dissemination strategy or digital literacy program that will be able to reach the different communities in terms of products and services that will meet their specific needs. So I just wanted to chip in that. And to Sarah Liu, we haven't made a lot of progress like you in terms of your instant payment platform deployment. But what we've done is to ensure that our regulations clearly state that exclusivity is not allowed. And for every time an approval is granted in terms of a licensed financial institution introducing a product or service, it is clearly stated that that product will be shared with will be introduced, but if the switch is deployed, it has to be channeled through the switch. So it is usually placed in most of our authorizations or communication for licensing and all of that. And we intend to also issue a regulatory directive that clearly states that all players will have to integrate to the switch with a particular timeline, again, based on the levels of different players, and we will ensure that they do that. If not, their license or licenses will be revoked. So those are some of the plans that we have. That tune at the top from the central bank saying that it is mandatory. for integration to the switch. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, just maybe to recap your contribution, we are looking at collaborating on guidelines on USSD. From the SIPS research, which is the State of Inclusive Instant Payment Systems research, we see that USSD is the predominant channel. So ensuring that this channel works or responds to consumers as the most used one from a guidelines perspective is an interesting point raised. You've spoken about understanding the needs of the consumers and their pain points, financial literacy, and seeing what and pushing awareness on what the use cases are being supported, as well as promoting interoperability, perhaps through mandating. Thank you for that. Are there any additional contributions before we move to the next activity? Okay.
Justin,
Yes.
sorry, good afternoon. My name is Wale Goodluck. I'm also Deputy CEO at Africa Nenda. I just wanted to chip in a little comment on, some of the things that our esteemed participants have been talking about in terms of one, how do you get the MNOs to come on board? I think that essentially is a stick and carrot play. I think the colleague from Liberia spoke extensively in terms of how the central bank has been able to put in place regulation to drive a few things. I think that is good. It's also good to, as much as possible, also drive a cohesive approach. So it's a combination of carrot and stick. That way, it's not really about pulling teeth, is getting everybody to come in, drive together, put resources into the integration, come on board. Pricing issues around USSD have pervaded across the continent and continue to be an issue in a lot of markets. I think from the experience in most markets, we've seen that regulation from the top has not fixed the problem. So there's always a need for engagement. And I thought it was good to mention that, as we go around the challenges for bringing MNOs on board, I think the overarching thing is that we must have a unanimity of purpose by everybody in the ecosystem. So everybody has to key in to the global objective of the national payment strategy, financial inclusion, and all those things. Once you have a key in and lock in at the top, then the mechanics will support the achievement of the objectives. Thank you.
Thank you, Wale. Are there any other comments from colleagues in response to the raised issues?
Actually, Jacqueline, I was going to say we are very fortunate to have on the platform here two instant payment systems that are very active. Muta just launched the last week, but it has been in process for the last 2 years. And I believe also Mohammed for the Central Bank of Egypt. It'd be great to hear also both of your perspective on that question in terms of onboarding the mobile money players.
Okay, thank you.
Muta, can I call on you on this question? And Mohammed as well, please feel free.
Yes, maybe this is William here from Tanzania. I can chip in. First, also, I just wanted to make a comment on the previous slide. Currently, we see that Tanzania is like we are in progressing stage also, because we almost all the basic issues we have already covered. So we think now we are in the progressive stage. But to come up with these questions that has been discussed here, yeah, actually onboarding the EMIs, actually it is a bit challenge, but for us it was easy to make it through collaboration. The first thing is collaboration between the central bank and also the EMIs. Every decision which were made, considering the platform, how to operate it, what is required, was being done in collaboration between the bank and those mobile money operators. Apart from that, also we had to consider to alter some of the regulations within the settlement side so that to accommodate settlement of these non-banks through the existing banks. So I think those are the areas that we had to put them in place. But also on the side of operations, also it requires a lot of interactions between the technical from the central banks. I mean, like the switch operator as the central bank, and also the side of the EMYs. So there should be a proper communication and also proper understanding between the two parties to make sure that all the system performance and also the agreement, the LSAs, all are in place to make sure that you serve the purpose and the consumers are enjoying the services instantly. Yeah, not only that, also another area that we can share in this is about when you consider these EMYs, initially it was a bit difficult to onboard them because of different level of technical capability during onboarding of the participants on the switch. You find there are some of them they have good technical capability, so you can onboard them very quickly. But also there are others who they are a bit lagging because some of them they depend on vendors and some sort like that. So that is also we had that experience in the onboarding of these non-banks. So that is what I can add to this.
Yeah, for Egypt, we have a scheme called Misa Digital. It is the scheme for the mobile money, which connects all mobile wallets issued from all banks and all MNOs in Egypt. And there is an interoperability between Misa Digital and the Instant Payment Network in Egypt. So large value of the transactions for cash in for the wallet, for example, are received through the instant payment network, through the communication between the instant payment network and the Misa digital network as well. So in Egypt, there is an interoperability between the instant payment network and all other networks inside Egypt.
Okay, thank you very much for the participation and the contributions. I'm sure there's much more, but allow me to move to the next activity, which is the breakout sessions. Please raise these additional comments in this breakout sessions. The previous slide, please, Barry. So we'll shortly be transitioning into these breakout groups to deliberate on these questions. Firstly, on looking at additional attributes that you think we should incorporate into the Just Shared Inclusivity Spectrum framework. And secondly, looking at how we may ensure data availability and transparency to track the growth of inclusive instant payment systems. So a quick discussion. I know we had highlighted earlier on that this will be a 25 minutes discussion, but because of time, perhaps we can squeeze that down to 15 minutes and then reconvene to share perspectives from the group discussions. So on your screen, you'll see you being invited to a breakout session. Please join the breakout sessions, and then we'll reconvene in 15 minutes.
Barry, are you sharing the links for the breakout sessions?
Yes, I'm splitting the groups right now.
Thank you very much. Yes, absolutely. Please do share your email addresses for continued discussion. I am putting my own right there, so please feel free as needed. To the person who asked the question, if we could share the emails.
Absolutely. So those, as we wait for Barry to share the
People are joining. Yeah, I've
recommendations.
already opened the breakout, so people can already join. You should receive a message inviting you to join your room.
Okay.
For Sabine and you, Sabine Lion.
Thank you very much. I just saw mine.
Thank you.
Maybe elephant.
Okay, so we go and join again. We were in the breakout and came back, so I'm gonna join.
All right, I think everybody's back in the plenary room. Jacqueline, over to you.
Jacqueline, you're on mute.
Sorry, I was on mute. Thank you, everybody, for the discussions in the breakout sessions. I'm curious to hear what has been discussed. At this point, I don't have much to say, but only invite my colleagues, Jainaba and Teddy, to moderate this session. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Jacqueline. So from our side, we're the group Lion, and we have Mohammed from the Central Bank of Egypt, who has graciously accepted to be the rapporteur of the deliberations from our groups. Mohammed?
Thank you. In our group, we have discussed in the features or attributes that should be there in the inclusive IPS. We had a discussion about the proxies or alias management and the benefits for the convenience of consumers as well. For performing transaction using alias management or proxy, like their mobile number or an email or nickname, for example. We had also a discussion about is this an easy implementation or it is a hard implementation? And it depends actually on the architecture of the systems inside each country. But if we are talking about the convenience of the consumers, it is convenient for the consumer to use their mobile number to perform a transaction instead of typing the full IBAN or the 16 card number digits as well. Also, the transparency of the instant payment systems as well. So consumers should be aware about any fees before performing any transactions. So this is for the first question. For the second question about the reports and the data availability, we have discussed that central banks should take into consideration publishing the instant payment systems figures. We have discussed also the way that the central banks collecting such details. Some countries have web applications or portals that are fetching the data online. Other countries as well have specific formats to receive such details and insights. And we have discussed also providing international institutions with such data or details. And I believe in most of the countries, it is per request assignment for each institution. But we believe that this process can be enhanced in the future for all central banks as well. This is for our group line discussions.
Thank you very much, Mohammed. Are there any comments or feedback? Okay, so I'll pass it on to my colleague Teddy. I know we're tight on time. Teddy?
Sure. Thank you very much, Geneva. So happy to represent Team Elephant in this discussion and pretty much quickly run through the points discussed. So in terms of the first question, what additional attributes, I think some of the key points raised were, one, to include a gender inclusivity aspect to the inclusivity spectrum, meaning that including a gender disaggregated data in this platform. Two was the second point that was discussed was whether or not we should, maybe have the first level of inclusivity divided into two, where, not only use cases are a differentiator, but also, adding a cross-domain component to the different levels of inclusivity, meaning that maybe instead of 3, having 4 levels of inclusivity, where one would be the first, and then the second would add, across domain interoperability or additional use cases. In terms of the second question on data, one of the items discussed was to include maybe to have a template for data reporting of the different systems, one, and two, for Africa NENDA to be able to, qualify IAPSs based on their transparency and disclosure of data to the public. And of course, under this, what we have discussed was, there are, of course, sensitivities and unease with regard to data sharing. So a sort of, trust building has to be done between central bankers and African and the rest of the ecosystem so that data is transparently shared. So another item we discussed was, of course, disclosure and transparency to the user in terms of, knowing the cost and the cost elements that are embedded in using IIPS systems, and also being able to transparently know what the system is. So these are some of the points, but we'll be sharing a detailed note on the discussions. Over to you, Jacqueline.
Thank you very much, Barry. Perhaps to the closing slide, please. Well, we've come to the end of this session. I'd like to express my sincere appreciation to you all for making time to be with us today and contributing to these key discussions. We appreciate conversations around key issues on policy, additional attributes for consideration into the inclusivity spectrum, and approaches to ensuring data availability and transparency. We have tackled some of the intended outcomes for the roundtable today, where we've shared areas where we think there's some work to do when it comes to policy making. We've discussed in depth the inclusivity framework and some of these key considerations. Please know that this discussion doesn't end here. As shared in the in the chat, there are emails. In case other attributes or other perspectives come up later on, kindly share with us, and we'll be happy to push this conversation forward. Our success means that we have we're building this tool from a collaborative point of view, and we're happy to incorporate any suggestions. This session has also facilitated some sharing of experiences, knowledge amongst all of us in the room. And we're looking forward to other outcomes, one of them being, the report. Following this discussion, we will have a report where we'll share with all of us on the deliberations, the additions, the contributions, and we look forward to additional engagements and especially to a shared commitment towards data availability and transparency. I managed to hear some very useful perspectives on how this can be emphasized, and I look forward to an easier SIPS data collection format in the future. So thank you very much for this session, and have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank
you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.